Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. Hey everyone, welcome back for part 3 of our off-grid cabin build in the wilderness of Alaska. If you haven't watched parts 1 and 2, I encourage you to go back and join our adventure from the beginning. In this video, we're going to wrap up the cabin build for now. We left off on the last video with the walls in place. We came out the next day and got the porch beam set, and I made my rafter templates. We also needed 6 or 7 more 2x6s for the rafters.
Timber!
The advantage of owning a sawmill is you can just go find a good dead tree and haul it to the mill. After finishing milling up the material, we took them into our nice warm shop and cut them using the templates I made. I used my power hand planer to clean up the edges and sanded the rafters that were going to be exposed. This also allowed us to get stain on these pieces since it was too cold outside to do any finish work. Back out of the cabin, it was time to start working on the roof. When building a roof, there are a couple of options. You can buy or build trusses that sit on top of your walls, or you can use rafters with a ridge beam. We used rafters because it would leave the most space in the loft. Rafters are tied together on the top with a ridge beam. This prevents them from moving front to back. They are also attached to the side walls. The load that is pushing down on the roof is transferred by the rafters to lateral pressure pushing out on the side walls. It is then important to use rafter ties to hold the side walls to make sure they don't get pushed apart by the weight of the roof. Often, the rafter ties will sit on top of the wall and be attached to the rafters themselves. In our cabin, our loft support beams are serving this purpose. This creates a perfectly engineered triangle that can handle a tremendous amount of weight. We don't have any ties over the front half of the cabin, but the large support beams are making sure those walls won't bow out. There are many things to consider when figuring out what size your rafters need to be: roof weight, average snow load, spacing apart, and pitch. We had the loft floor to stand on while we worked on the back half of the cabin, and I built scaffolding over the front half of the cabin so that we had that to work off as well. That's when I learned quite quickly that you should attach the 2x4s before you stand on one end. The front gable wall didn't have any windows directly in the middle like the back did, so I set a support mast to help hold the ridge beam in place while we set the front rafters. Initially, I just toe-nailed the rafters to the wall, but came through later with long timberlock screws and fastened them better. Right when we were finishing up for the day, we had a friend fly by on the lake. We had a few 2x6s left over from building the rafters, so we used those to put on the front porch. But that meant digging down to the frozen tundra once again. We assembled the framing of the porch inside the cabin and then just moved it into place. We used the plywood from the other cabin once again as a temporary surface for the porch. We installed ladder supports to hold the overhang on the back of the cabin. For these we used short 3x3s that fit in the notch on one rafter and attached to the side of another. This then gave us something to attach the final back rafters to. I was very thankful to have the porch in place when we set the final rafters. It was nice to have a flat surface to set the ladder on. The visit to the cabin prior to this one, I finished framing out the front gable wall. I didn't get it on video, but in this shot you can see the framing for the triangle windows we have planned for this area. Attaching the tops of these rafters to the ridge beam was probably my least favorite part of this entire build. I don't like heights, and this was a pretty shaky position to put myself in. Normally I would just use plywood for the roof deck, but it's hard to make plywood look good. Since the bottom side of this roof decking is going to be exposed, we milled up 1x6s to use for this. They give it a much better finished look from the bottom. We have plans to put siding on the walls to cover up the other plywood as well. Everywhere you won't be able to see from the bottom, we just use purlins, or skip sheeting. This is a method you can use with metal roofing, so that you don't need the material to cover the entire roof. It also makes getting around on this 12-12 pitch roof much easier. There were a few things we needed to wrap up before we could get the roof metal installed. I got the wood stove in place and put the chimney in up to the roof. We just have a small wall tent wood stove for now, but we plan to upgrade to a larger stove when we can find a sweet deal on a used one. We also put some window screen in on the peak and above the blocking between the rafters to make sure wasps and other pests don't find their way in. We have air gaps at the top and bottom of the roof to allow airflow above the ceiling insulation below the metal to help prevent condensation from forming there and rotting our insulation. Have I mentioned I don't like heights? With a pitch this steep, roofing is hard. Frozen metal roofing is even worse. I found an old bent-up ladder and reinforced it and made some brackets to serve as my work surface while getting the metal in place. On a lower pitch roof, I would place all the roof metal sheets and then come back and put the gable trim and ridge cap in place. To limit the amount of time I spent on this makeshift roof ladder, I installed both the gable trim and roof cap while I could still reach them to get the screws in. We needed 10.5 foot long pieces of metal for this roof. Some metal roofing suppliers will sell it to you at the exact length you need. It's a little more expensive to do it that way, and since I'm cheap, I just got the 12-foot pieces from the big blue box store and cut it to length. We put the cut end up on the top so it would be covered by the ridge cap. From there, metal roofing is easy. Just lay one piece after another and make sure they're straight. We also got the rest of the chimney pipe installed while we worked our way across the roof. All of the double wall pipe for this cabin was salvaged from our other property. Just a few things left to finish before we're ready to spend the night. The 3 big windows on the front of the cabin and the little one we put up in the loft were already out on this property, intended for the old cabin. The long skinny window at the back and the triangle windows on the front we purchased from a local glass company. We had them make up double pane window glass for our specifications. To install the glass, I put the trim on the outside of the window first. Then I set the glass and stuffed insulation all the way around the window. The final step is to nail the trim on the inside to hold the window in place. It's a good idea to put silicone at least on the outside of the window to make sure that the water doesn't work its way in and rot out the trim pieces. There will always be work at the cabin, but we're so excited to start enjoying our new space. We have already spent quite a few nights out at our little getaway.
Any fish in there?
And have enjoyed sharing it with some friends.
Oh my goodness, Tyler. Nice fish.
Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please consider supporting us by subscribing to our channel. I would also love feedback in the comments and what you thought of our videos. We are a new channel and already blown away by the support you all have given to the first 2 videos. Stay tuned, more adventures to come. The river has thawed and our access to the cabin is limited, but we're looking forward to sharing more of our projects with you.